Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight I want to take you somewhere strange, somewhere so far back in time that even the idea of you does not exist yet. Tonight we are not just exploring history, we are going back to before history even began. Because I have a question, one that has been quietly sitting in my mind for a long time. A question I never really asked out loud. Where do I fit in all of this? In this vast universe? In this endless timeline? In this story that began long before I was ever here. I used to think my life was complicated, that my problems were heavy, that my story mattered more than anything else. But then I started looking deeper, not into my past, but into the past of everything. And what I found changed the way I see myself. Forever. Because before you took your first breath, before your parents were born, before even the Earth existed, there were 13.8 billion years of chaos, of silence, of unimaginable transformation. A time when there was no sky, no oceans, no life, not even a single thought, just energy compressed into something so small, so dense that even the laws of physics begin to lose their meaning. And then something happened. Not an explosion in space, but an expansion of space itself. The beginning of everything, what we now call the Big Bang. From that single moment, time began to move, space began to stretch, and the universe began its long journey. A journey that would eventually lead to stars, to galaxies, to planets, to oceans, to life, and somehow to you, sitting here, listening to this very moment. Tonight, we are going to follow that journey together, not as scientists, not as historians, but as two travelers, quietly drifting through time trying to understand how something as vast as the universe could ever lead to something as small as us. And maybe, just maybe, by the end of this journey, we won't feel so small anymore. So before you get comfortable, take a gentle moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if these deep sleep history stories help you find peace, sleep better, or simply reflect on our shared journey through time. Now close your eyes, let your breathing slow down, and allow yourself to drift gently back to the very beginning of everything. I don't remember exactly when the question first appeared. It wasn't loud. It didn't arrive like a sudden realization or a dramatic moment. It was quieter than that, almost like a whisper somewhere in the back of my mind. The kind of thought you try to ignore at first because it feels too big, too uncomfortable to sit with for too long, but it stayed. It kept returning, especially in those moments when everything else became still. Late at night, when the world around me finally slowed down, and there was nothing left to distract me from it. What am I in all of this? Not just who I am, not my name, not my work, not the roles I play every day, but something deeper than that, something harder to define. Where do I actually fit in this universe that feels so vast, so indifferent, so impossibly large that it almost makes everything I do feel small, temporary, fragile? I used to think that if I worked harder, achieved more, became something greater, then maybe I would feel a sense of certainty, a sense of meaning that would ground me. But the strange thing is, the more I looked outward, the more I chased those answers in the world around me, the more distant they seemed, like trying to hold on to something that keeps slipping through your fingers, no matter how tightly you try to grasp it. And then something shifted. It didn't come from success or failure or any single event. It came from a quiet realization, one that felt almost unsettling at first, that maybe I had been looking in the wrong along. Maybe the answer I was searching for wasn't somewhere ahead of me, but somewhere far behind me, so far back that it existed long before I ever did. That thought stopped me, because for the first time, I wasn't thinking about my future. I wasn't thinking about tomorrow or next year or even my lifetime. I was thinking about everything that had to happen just for me to exist at all. And suddenly, my life didn't feel like a starting point anymore. It felt like the end of a very long story. A story that didn't begin with me, a story that didn't even begin with humanity, a story that didn't begin with the earth or the sun. or even the stars. It began somewhere far deeper than that, somewhere so distant in time that the concept of before and after didn't even exist yet. And I realized if I truly wanted to understand where I stand today, if I wanted to understand what my life actually means, then I couldn't just look at the present. I had to go back, all the way back to the very beginning of everything. Because how can you understand your place in the universe if you don't understand how the universe began? That question stayed with me. It followed me into quiet moments, into long walks, into nights where sleep didn't come easily. And instead of pushing it away, I started leaning into it, letting it pull me deeper, letting it guide me somewhere unfamiliar, somewhere vast, somewhere almost impossible to fully comprehend. I began to imagine what it would feel like to step outside of time, to watch everything unfold from the very first moment, to witness the birth of existence itself, not as a scientist, not as someone analyzing data or equations, but simply as a traveler, someone curious enough, quiet enough to observe, to feel, to reflect. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something that both comforted me and unsettled me at the same time. That I am not separate from this story. I am part of it. Every atom in my body, every breath I take, every thought that passes through my mind is somehow connected to events that happened billions of years ago. Events so ancient, so powerful that they shaped everything that came after, including me. And yet here I am in this brief moment of awareness, trying to make sense of it all, and trying to understand how something so vast, so complex, could ever lead to something as simple and as temporary as a single human life. That's when I made a decision, not a loud one, not a dramatic one, but a quiet commitment to myself. If I want to understand my life, then I need to understand the story that created it. And that means going back further than memory, further than history. We get further than anything we've ever experienced as human beings. Back to a time before there were questions, before there were answers, before there was even a universe to ask anything at all. So I invite you, gently, slowly, without rushing anything. Come with me, not as someone looking for quick answers, but as someone willing to sit with the unknown. Let's go back together to the moment before everything began. If we keep going back further than memory, further than imagination, we eventually arrive at a place that doesn't feel like a place at all. A moment that doesn't feel like a moment. Because here, the rules we are used to no longer apply. There is no sky above, no ground below, no light, no darkness, not even silence in the way we understand it, because silence itself requires time, and time does not exist yet. It's difficult to even describe this state, because every word we use belongs to a universe that hasn't been born yet. But if we try gently, patiently, we can begin to sense it. Everything, absolutely everything, compressed into something unimaginably small, a single point, infinitely dense, infinitely hot, a state so extreme that even the laws of physics, the very rules that govern our reality today, begin to break down and again catastrophize. Or perhaps they simply haven't come into existence yet. And in that strange, incomprehensible condition, there is no past, no future, no distance, no separation. There's only potential waiting. Not in time, but before time, something happens. Not a sound, not a flash, not an explosion like the ones we imagine when we hear the word bang, because there is no space for anything to explode into. Instead, what happens is far more subtle and far more profound. Space itself begins to stretch, time itself begins to flow, energy itself begins to unfold. This is what we call the Big Bang. But the name can be misleading because it suggests violence, a sudden burst outward into emptiness, when in reality, there is no emptiness yet. There is only the rapid expansion of everything that exists and everything that will ever exist. In less than a fraction of a second, the universe grows, not into something, but as something, expanding in every direction at once, carrying with it the seeds of all future structure, all future matter, all future life. And as I try to imagine this, I realize something that feels almost impossible to fully grasp. There was no outside watching this happen. There was no edge, no boundary, no center that you could point to and say, it began here, because everywhere was the beginning. Every point in space today was once part of that same singular origin, which means, in a way that feels both humbling and deeply personal, the place where you are right now, the space you occupy in this very moment, was once part of that beginning. And as the universe continues to expand, it also begins to change, to cool, to evolve, because in those earliest moments, everything is too hot, too energetic for anything stable to form. Particles cannot hold together. Structures cannot exist. It is a storm of pure energy, moving, colliding, transforming. But expansion brings cooling, and cooling brings possibility. The first tiny fluctuations begin to appear, almost like faint ripples in an otherwise uniform sea. And those ripples, though small, will eventually grow, shaping the large-scale structure of the universe, guiding matter into clusters, into stars, into galaxies, into everything we will one day recognize as the cosmos. But right now, we are still at the beginning. Time has just started ticking. Space has just started stretching. Energy is just beginning to take form. And I can't help but pause here for a moment, because this isn't just the beginning of the universe. It's the beginning of everything that will ever lead to me, to you, to this very thought. Every decision you've made, every memory you carry, every breath you've taken can be traced back to this exact moment. This quiet, almost unimaginable transition from nothing we can understand to something that will eventually become everything we know. And as I sit with that realization, I feel something shift inside me, because suddenly my life doesn't feel isolated anymore. It feels connected, woven into a timeline so vast that even the idea of importance begins to change. Maybe the question was never about whether we matter. Maybe the real question is how something so simple, so formless, so empty could ever become something capable of asking that question at all. And with that thought, we continue, slowly, gently, following the universe as it begins to take shape. As the universe continues to expand, something subtle begins to change, not all at once. Not dramatically, but quietly, almost patiently. The chaos that once defined everything begins to soften. The overwhelming heat, the unimaginable density slowly start to ease, and for the first time, structure becomes possible. In those earliest moments, the universe is still far too hot for anything stable to exist. Energy dominates everything. Particles appear and disappear in fleeting instants, colliding, transforming, dissolving back into pure energy. It is a restless, turbulent state where nothing can hold its shape, nothing can endure. But expansion has a consequence, and that consequence is cooling. And cooling changes everything. As the temperature drops, even slightly, the universe begins to allow the formation of the smallest building blocks, the most fundamental pieces of matter, things so tiny, so far removed from our everyday experience that we can hardly imagine them, and yet they are the foundation of everything we are. Quarks. They emerge from the energy, not as solid objects, but as fluctuations. Possibilities becoming real. They move freely at first, not bound to anything, drifting through a universe that is still too hot, too chaotic for them to settle. But as time passes and the universe continues to cool, something remarkable happens. Quarks begin to come together, not randomly, not by chance alone, but guided by the fundamental forces that are now beginning to take shape. They bind, forming more stable combinations. And from these combinations, new particles emerge. Protons, neutrons. For the first time, matter begins to take on a form that can persist, that can survive beyond a fleeting moment, that can exist long enough to become something more. And as I imagine this transformation, I can't help but feel a quiet sense of awe, because this is not just physics. This is the beginning of permanence, the beginning of something that can last. But even now, the universe is not ready for atoms. Not yet. it is still too hot, too energetic for electrons to settle around these newly formed nuclei. Every attempt at structure is quickly broken apart, as if the universe is still too restless, too young to hold on to anything for long. So it continues to expand, and it continues to cool, minute by minute, moment by moment, until eventually conditions shift again. And this time, something holds, protons and neutrons combine, forming the first atomic nuclei, a process we now understand as primordial nucleosynthesis. And from this process, the simplest elements are born: hydrogen, helium, the lightest, the most basic, and yet the most important, because these elements will become the raw material for everything that follows: stars, galaxies, planets, and eventually life itself. And as I sit with that realization, I begin to see something differently. Everything I know, everything I am, was once just this: hydrogen, helium, simple, silent, drifting in an expanding universe. There is something deeply humbling in that thought, because we often think of ourselves as complex, as unique, as separate from the universe around us. But in this moment, in this early stage of existence, there is no separation. There is only matter, slowly organizing itself, slowly becoming more structured, more complex, more capable of forming the intricate patterns we now call reality. And yet, even as these first elements form, the universe remains mostly empty, vast, quiet, with matter spread thinly across expanding space. There are no stars yet, no galaxies, no light as we recognize it today. Just a gentle cooling, a slow settling, a transition from chaos into something that feels almost like order. And maybe that's what strikes me the most, that everything we see today, everything that feels solid, stable, permanent, began in chaos, not controlled, not designed in the way we often imagine, but emerging naturally, gradually, from conditions that seem too unstable, too unpredictable to ever create something meaningful. And yet, here we are. The result of a universe that learned slowly, patiently, how to organize itself. And as I follow this transformation from quarks to protons to the first atoms, I begin to feel something shift again. Because maybe the story of the universe is not just about how matter formed. Maybe it's about how chaos, given enough time, becomes structure, and how structure, given enough time, becomes something capable of wondering how it all began. So we continue, gently, slowly, moving forward through time as the universe prepares for its next transformation. For a long time, longer than we can truly imagine, the universe remains hidden, not empty, not silent, but obscured, filled with a dense, glowing fog, a hot plasma where light itself cannot travel freely. Photons exist, but they are trapped, constantly colliding with particles scattered again and again, never able to move in a straight line, never able to escape. It's a strange thought to imagine a universe filled with light, and yet completely dark, because darkness, in this case, is not the absence of light, since it is the absence of freedom. Light is there, everywhere, but it cannot move, it cannot reveal anything, it cannot illuminate. And so the universe waits, not consciously, not intentionally, but inevitably, as it continues to expand. And with that expansion comes cooling. Slower, gentler, more stable conditions begin to emerge. And something profound starts to happen. The energy of the universe drops just enough for electrons, those tiny restless particles, to finally slow down, to finally be captured by the positively charged nuclei that formed earlier. For the first time, electrons and nuclei come together, forming neutral atoms: hydrogen, helium. And this changes everything, because once atoms become neutral, photons are no longer constantly scattered. They are no longer trapped in that endless cycle of collisions. Suddenly, light is free. It can move, it can travel, it can cross the vast distances of the expanding universe. And in that moment, something extraordinary occurs. The universe becomes transparent. After approximately 380,000 years since the beginning, what was once an opaque, glowing fog clears, and light begins its journey. Spreading outward in all directions, carrying with it a snapshot, a memory of what the universe looked like in that very instant. This is what we now call the cosmic microwave background, or CMB, a faint echo of the early universe, still detectable today, still surrounding us, still whispering the story of that first release of light. And what fascinates me, what truly lingers in my thoughts, is the idea that this ancient light is still here, right now, in this moment. As you elicit and as I speak these words, that same light is passing through space, stretching, cooling, evolving with the universe itself. It has been traveling for billions of years, unchanged in its purpose, simply moving, simply existing, carrying the memory of a time when the universe first became visible. And when I pause to think about that, I feel something shift again. Because this isn't just light, it's history, frozen in motion, a message from a universe that had just begun to reveal itself. And it makes me wonder how many things in my own life remain hidden, not because they don't exist, but because I'm not yet in a place where I can see them clearly. Because just like the early universe, sometimes everything is already there. The meaning, the answers, the connections. But the conditions aren't right yet. The noise is too loud. The chaos is too overwhelming. And so it all remains invisible until something changes, until things slow down, until clarity begins to form. And suddenly what was always there becomes visible. The universe didn't create light in that moment. It simply allowed it to be seen. And maybe there's something deeply human in that. Because we often think our lives begin when we understand them, when things make sense. But maybe, just like the universe, everything begins long before that, in confusion, in darkness, in uncertainty. And only later, after enough time has passed, do we finally begin to see that everything, even the light, was always there, waiting for the moment it could finally be free. So we sit here, quietly, at the edge of that realization, watching as the universe takes its first clear breath, as light begins its endless journey, and as darkness slowly gives way to understanding. After the first light finally began its journey, after the universe became transparent, after everything that once felt hidden slowly started to reveal itself, there was still something missing, something essential, something that would take this quiet, expanding universe and transform it into something far more structured, far more alive. Because even though atoms now existed, even though light could travel freely, the universe was still, mostly empty, vast, silent, stretched thin across unimaginable distances. Hydrogen and helium drifted through space, scattered, almost lonely, with no stars to shine, no galaxies to gather them, no warmth, no structure, just a slow, continuous expansion into darkness. And yet, within that emptiness, something subtle was already at work, something invisible, but powerful. Gravity. At first, it doesn't seem like much, especially compared to the violent forces that shaped the earliest moments of the universe. Gravity is quiet, gentle, almost patient. It doesn't push, it doesn't explode, it simply pulls, and it never stops. Every tiny particle, every atom of hydrogen, every trace of matter begins to feel this pull. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, gradually, like a whisper that grows stronger over time. And where there are slight differences, slight irregularities, tiny variations in density left behind from the early universe, gravity begins to amplify them. A slightly denser region pulls in more matter, which makes it even denser, which pulls in even more. And so begins a process that feels almost inevitable. Matter starts to gather. Clouds begin to form. Vast regions of gas slowly collapsing inward under their own weight, becoming denser, hotter, more concentrated. And as I imagine this, I can't help but feel a strange sense of familiarity, because it doesn't happen suddenly. It doesn't happen perfectly. It takes time. It takes pressure. It takes the quiet persistence of something that never lets go. Gravity doesn't rush. It waits and it pulls until something begins to take shape. These enormous clouds of gas, which we now call nebulae. continue to collapse. And as they do, something incredible begins to happen at their core. The pressure rises, the temperature climbs, until eventually conditions become extreme enough for a new kind of transformation to begin. Nuclear fusion. At that moment, a star is born, not all at once, not in a flash of perfection, but in a gradual ignition, like a slow awakening. A quiet fire beginning to burn in the heart of the darkness. And suddenly, the universe is no longer dark. Points of light begin to appear, scattered at first, then more and more as gravity continues its work, gathering matter, forming more stars, more regions of light in an otherwise vast and silent cosmos. And these stars are not just beautiful, they are essential, because within them, the universe begins to change again. They take the simplest elements, hydrogen, helium, and begin to transform them into something more. But even before we reach that stage, something else is already unfolding. Stars do not exist alone. They gather just as atoms once did, just as gas clouds once did, drawn together by gravity into even larger structures. Galaxies, massive collections of stars, gas, dust, all bound together, moving through space, evolving over billions of years. And as I step back, as I try to see the bigger picture, I begin to notice a pattern with It started with particles, then clouds, then stars, and now galaxies. Each step building on the one before, each level of structure emerging from something simpler. And it makes me wonder, was this always the direction? From chaos to order, from simplicity to complexity. Because if that's true, then maybe my own life, my own confusion, my own sense of being lost is just part of that same process. Maybe I'm not meant to have everything figured out right away. Maybe, like the universe itself, I'm still in the process of forming, still being pulled together, still shaped by forces I don't fully understand, still becoming something. And when I think of it that way, something inside me softens. Because suddenly, the pressure doesn't feel like a burden anymore. It feels like gravity, not something that's breaking me, but something that's slowly, patiently, pulling me into shape. And somewhere in the vast darkness of the early universe, the first stars continue to ignite, quietly lighting the path forward as structure begins to emerge from what once felt like nothing. As the first stars begin to shine, scattered like quiet sparks across the darkness, something deeper is unfolding within them. Something we cannot see with our eyes, but something that will change the entire direction of the universe. Because these stars, these distant points of light, are not just glowing, though they are working. At their core, hidden beneath layers of gas and unimaginable pressure, something extraordinary is happening. A process so powerful, so transformative, that it turns simplicity into complexity, that takes the most basic ingredients of the universe and begins to reshape them into something entirely new. Nuclear fusion. Inside every star, gravity continues its work, pulling matter inward, compressing it tighter and tighter, until the temperature rises to millions of degrees. A heat so intense that atoms can no longer remain intact in the way we understand them. Electrons are stripped away, nuclei collide with such force that they overcome their natural repulsion. And when they do, they fuse, hydrogen nuclei collide, merge, and transform, becoming helium, releasing an enormous amount of energy in the process. Energy that pushes outward, balancing the inward pull of gravity, creating a delicate equilibrium. A quiet tension between collapse and expansion. This balance, this constant negotiation between opposing forces, is what allows a star to live. And as I think about that, I can't help but notice something familiar, because it feels almost like life itself. This constant pull inward, this constant push outward, this need to hold everything together while also trying not to collapse under the pressure. Stars don't survive because they are stable, they survive because they are balanced. And within that balance, they begin to create. Because fusion doesn't stop at helium. As stars grow older, as their cores become denser, hotter, more extreme, they begin to fuse heavier and heavier elements, step by step, layer by layer, building complexity from simplicity. Helium becomes carbon, carbon becomes oxygen, oxygen becomes neon, and so on, deeper and deeper into the periodic table, each stage requiring more energy, more pressure, more intensity, as if the universe itself is pushing the limits of what is possible. And all of this incredible transformation is happening silently, hidden inside stars that appear so calm, so distant, so peaceful when we look up at the night sky. It's strange, isn't it? How something so violent, so extreme, can appear so beautiful from far away. And it makes me wonder how many things in life are like that. How many transformations, how many moments of pressure, of heat, of struggle are actually shaping something essential, even if we can't see it yet. Because inside those stars, under all that pressure, something extraordinary is being created. The elements that will one day form planets, the elements that will become oceans, the elements that will eventually become life. And when I realize that, when I really sit with it, something shifts again. Because this isn't just about stars anymore. This is about origin. Every atom of carbon in my body, every oxygen molecule I breathe, every calcium structure in my bones was once forged inside a star. Not metaphorically, but literally, which means at some point billions of years ago, the building blocks of who I am today were part of a distant star, burning, transforming, creating something new. And that thought, it doesn't just feel scientific, it feels deeply personal, because suddenly I'm not separate from the universe anymore. I am made of it, formed through processes that began long before I existed, carried through time, through space, until eventually they became me. And yet, those stars continue to burn, continue to create, unaware that one day their work would become something capable of wondering how it all began. And as I follow this realization, as I sit quietly with the idea that everything I am was once created in the heart of a star, I begin to feel something different. Not small, not insignificant, but connected. Part of a process so vast, so patient, that it turns simple particles into something that can look up at the night sky and feel a sense of belonging. And so the stars continue their silent work deep in the darkness, forging the elements that will one day become everything. For a long time, stars seem eternal, steady points of light that quietly hold their place in the darkness, burning, creating, sustaining that delicate balance between gravity pulling inward and energy pushing outward. And from where we stand, looking up at the night sky, it's easy to believe that they will last forever, unchanged, constant, almost permanent. But the truth is something very different. Stars are not eternal. They are temporary. And like everything else in the universe, they are born, they live, and eventually they die. And at first, that thought feels unsettling. Because if even stars, these massive, powerful engines of creation, cannot last forever, then what does that say about everything else? But as I continue to follow this journey, as I begin to understand what happens when a star reaches the end of its life, something unexpected begins to reveal itself. Because the death of a star is not an ending, it is a transformation, a final act more powerful, more important than everything that came before it. As a star exhausts its fuel, as the fusion processes in its core begin to slow, the balance that once held it together starts to break down. Gravity, which has been quietly pulling inward this entire time, begins to take over. The core collapses rapidly, violently, and in that collapse, something extraordinary happens. The outer layers of the star, unable to hold themselves together, are blasted outward in an explosion so powerful, so bright, that for a brief moment it can outshine entire galaxies. This is what we call a supernova. But again, the word explosion doesn't fully capture what is happening here, because this is not just destruction. This is creation on a scale almost impossible to comprehend. In that final moment, as the star collapses and explodes, the conditions become so extreme, so energetic, that elements heavier than anything created during the star's lifetime are formed. Gold, iron, calcium, elements that require unimaginable pressure and energy are forged in an instant, and then they are released, thrown out into space, and so out of space, scattered across the cosmos, carried into the vastness of the universe where they will drift, mix, and eventually become part of something new. And as I sit with that image, I feel something shift again, because this means everything that makes up the world around me, everything solid, everything real, everything that feels permanent was created in the death of something else. The iron in my blood, the calcium in my bones, the trace elements that allow my body to function, all of it was once inside a dying star. And that realization, it doesn't feel dark, it doesn't feel tragic, it feels strangely beautiful, because it suggests something deeper, something almost poetic, that nothing in this universe is wasted, that even destruction, even collapse, even endings are part of a larger process, a process that transforms what once was into something new. And maybe that applies to more than just stars, because how many times in life do things fall apart? How many times do we experience endings? And in those moments, it feels like loss, like failure, like something has been taken away. But what if, just like the stars, those moments are not the end? What if they are the beginning of something else, something we can't yet see? Because from the perspective of the universe, a supernova is not a tragedy, it is a necessary step. Without it, the elements needed for planets would not exist. The chemistry required for life would never form, and beings like us would never be here. So in a way, every breath I take is connected to an ancient explosion, a distant star ending its life so that something new could begin. And as I let that thought settle, I no longer see the death of stars as something distant or abstract. I see it as part of my own origin, part of a story that continues to unfold long after those stars are gone. Because their light may fade, but what they created remains, scattered across space, waiting to become something more. And somewhere, in the vastness of the universe, those elements continue to drift, quietly preparing for the next chapter of creation. There is a moment somewhere along this journey when everything I've been learning, everything I've been trying to understand, stops feeling like distant science and starts feeling personal, deeply personal, and it happens quietly without warning, almost like a realization that slowly rises to the surface until suddenly it's impossible to ignore. I remember sitting there thinking about stars, about their birth, their life, their violent deaths, about how they forged the elements and scattered them across the universe. And then, without fully realizing why, I asked myself something simple. Where did I come from? Not in the way we usually answer that question, not in terms of family or place or time, but in a deeper sense, in a way that connects me, not just to Earth, but to everything. And the answer, when it finally settled in, didn't feel loud or dramatic. It felt quiet, almost heavy, like something that needed time to fully sink in. Every atom in my body was once part of a star, not metaphorically, not poetically, but literally. The carbon that forms the structure of my cells, the oxygen that flows through my lungs, the iron that moves through my blood, all of it was created in the heart of a star, billions of years ago. And then that star died, exploded, collapsed, scattered its remains into the vastness of space. And those remains drifted for millions, maybe billions of years, until they became part of something else. A cloud, a new star system, a forming planet, until eventually they became part of Earth, and then part of life, and now part of me. There is something about that realization that makes everything else go quiet, because suddenly I am no longer just a person standing on a planet in a universe that feels distant and separate. I am part of that universe, not observing it, but made from it. And for a moment, I don't know what to do with that feeling, because it changes the way I see everything. The sky above me is no longer just something I look at, it is something I came from. The stars are no longer distant points of light. They are part of my origin, and the distance between me and everything else begins to dissolve. I start to realize that the line I thought existed between myself and the universe was never really there. It was something I imagined, something I believed, because I never stopped long enough to see the connection. And now, sitting with that understanding, I feel something I didn't expect. Not small, not insignificant, but connected, deeply connected to something vast, something ancient, something that existed long before me and will continue long after I'm gone. And yet, for this brief moment, I get to be part of it, to think, to feel, to wonder, to ask questions about the very process that created me. And that feels extraordinary, because out of all the transformations, all the explosions, all the chaos and structure that shaped this universe, something emerged that can look back and ask, how did this happen? And maybe that's what moves me the most. Not just that I came from the stars, but that the stars in some quiet, indirect way have become aware of themselves. Through me, through you, through every conscious moment that exists in this universe. And as I sit here feeling that connection, I realize something simple but profound. I am not separate from this story. I am part of it, a continuation of it, a brief moment in a timeline that stretches across billions of years. And for the first time, that doesn't make me feel small. It makes me feel like I belong. And in that quiet sense of belonging, I find something I wasn't even sure I was looking for. A kind of peace, a kind of understanding. That doesn't come from having all the answers, but from knowing that I am already part of something much bigger, something that began long before I ever existed and will continue long after this moment fades. And somehow, that makes this moment feel even more meaningful. After everything we've followed so far, after the first light, after the birth of stars, after their silent work and their violent endings, the universe now carries something new, something richer, heavier, more complex than before. The elements created inside those stars scattered across space, drifting, mixing, waiting, and somewhere, in a quiet region of a galaxy, something begins again. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gently, almost unnoticed. A cloud. A vast, cold, drifting cloud of gas and dust, made mostly of hydrogen and helium, but now seeded with heavier elements, the remnants of ancient stars that lived and died long before this moment. A cloud that stretches across distances so large that it would take light years just to cross it, and yet it is fragile, almost delicate, suspended in the stillness of space. This is what we call a solar nebula, and for a long time it simply exists, drifting, slowly changing, shaped by subtle currents, influenced by distant forces, until something disturbs it. Maybe a nearby star explodes, maybe a passing wave of energy ripples through the region. We don't know exactly what caused it, but something triggers the collapse, and once it begins, it doesn't stop. Gravity, that same quiet force that once gathered particles into stars, begins to pull this cloud inward, slowly at first, then faster, as more and more material falls toward the center. The cloud begins to shrink, to condense, to gather itself into something denser, something more structured, and as it collapses, it begins to spin. Not because anything pushed it, but because of a simple rule: when something contracts, it rotates faster. Like a figure skater pulling their arms inward, like a system conserving its motion. The cloud flattens, stretches, transforms. Okay, until it is no longer just a cloud, it becomes a disk, a rotating, flattened structure, with most of its mass concentrated toward the center and a wide, swirling plain of gas and dust extending outward in all directions. This is the protoplanetary disk. And as I imagine this transformation, I find myself pausing again, because this is no longer just about stars. This is no longer just about distant cosmic events. This is the beginning of something closer, something that will eventually become home. At the center of this spinning disk, matter continues to fall inward, compressing, heating, growing denser with every passing moment, until eventually conditions become extreme enough for a new star to ignite. Our star, the sun, and as it begins to shine, faint at first, then stronger, it illuminates the disk around it, revealing a scene that feels almost chaotic. Particles colliding, dust grains sticking together, fragments breaking apart and reforming, everything in motion, everything interacting. And yet, within that apparent chaos, there is a pattern emerging, because those tiny particles, those grains of dust begin to stick, not perfectly, not efficiently, but enough. They form clumps, small at first, then larger still. Through countless collisions, countless interactions, these clumps grow, slowly becoming solid bodies, irregular, unstable, but real. These are the first steps toward planets. And as I follow this process, as I watch this disk evolve, I begin to feel something familiar again, because it reminds me of something. That beginnings rarely look like beginnings. They look like chaos. They look like uncertainty, like random collisions, like things falling apart as often as they come together. And yet, within that chaos, something is forming, something that doesn't yet know what it will become, something that is still incomplete, but something that is moving slowly, inevitably, toward structure, toward identity, toward existence. And maybe that's what strikes me the most, that the place I now call Earth, the ground beneath my feet, the world I've always known, began here, in a cloud of dust and gas, spinning in the darkness, without shape, without certainty, just a possibility. And as I sit with that thought, I realize something quiet but profound, that everything stable, everything familiar, everything that feels permanent today was once part of something uncertain, something unformed, something that could have turned out differently. And yet, it didn't. It continued, it evolved, it became something more, and now we are about to follow that transformation from dust to something solid, to something that will one day hold oceans, carry life, and allow someone like me to look back and wonder how it all began. As the disk continues to spin around the young sun, what once felt like scattered dust begins to change. Slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly at first, tiny grains collide, not always gently, not always successfully. Sometimes they bounce apart, sometimes they shatter, but sometimes just enough, they stick. And when they do, something begins. Small clumps form, fragile, irregular, drifting through a chaotic environment where collisions are constant, unpredictable, and often violent. But with each moment, with each interaction, some of those clumps survive. And when they survive, they grow a little bigger, a little heavier, and because they are heavier, they begin to pull. Gravity returns, once again, quietly shaping everything, drawing nearby material inward, increasing the chances of further collisions, further growth, further accumulation. This process, known as accretion, is not smooth, it is not orderly, it is messy, chaotic, filled with impacts, fragmentation, rebuilding, over and over again, a cycle of destruction and creation happening simultaneously. And yet, within that chaos, something undeniable is happening. Objects are growing, from dust to pebbles, from pebbles to rocks, from rocks to massive bodies, until eventually they become something much larger, something we call planetesimals. These are no longer fragile clumps. They are solid, gravitationally bound bodies, large enough to influence their surroundings, large enough to survive collisions that would have destroyed their earlier forms. And once they reach this stage, everything accelerates, because now collisions are no longer just random encounters between particles. They are events, powerful, energetic, shaping the very structure of what is forming. Planetesimals collide with each other, sometimes merging, sometimes breaking apart, but more often than not, building something larger. Protoplanets. And somewhere within this vast swirling disk, in a region where conditions are just right, not too close to the sun, not too far, a particular cluster of matter begins to dominate, begins to gather more material than its neighbors, begins to grow faster, larger, stronger. This is the beginning of something that will one day become Earth. But at this stage, it is nothing like the world we know. It is raw, violent, unstable. A young protoplanet, still forming, still evolving, still shaped by constant impacts. Every collision adding mass, adding energy, adding heat, until its surface is no longer solid in the way we understand it, but molten, fluid, constantly shifting under extreme temperatures. And as I try to picture this, I realize something important. This world, this place I now stand on, did not begin as something calm or beautiful. It began in chaos, in fire, in collision, in relentless transformation. There's something almost unsettling about that, because we tend to think of Earth as stable, as familiar, as something that has always been here. But the truth is, it had to become this. Through countless impacts, through endless accumulation, through a process that could have gone differently at any moment, because every collision carried risk, too strong, and everything could have shattered, too weak, and growth might have stalled, and yet, somehow, the process continued. Material kept gathering, mass kept increasing, until this young protoplanet, this proto-Earth, became large enough to truly hold itself together. And with that size comes something new. Gravity strong enough to pull in even more material to shape its own structure, to begin separating what is heavy from what is light. But that transformation is still ahead. Right now, we are still in the phase of becoming, still in the stage where everything is uncertain, where nothing is fully formed, where the outcome is not yet guaranteed. And maybe that's what makes this moment so powerful. Because it reminds me that even something as solid, as stable, as familiar as Earth was once just a possibility, a fragile beginning, shaped by forces beyond its control, moving through chaos toward something more. And as I sit with that thought, I feel something shift again, because if something as complex, as alive, as enduring as this planet can emerge from such instability, then maybe uncertainty is not something to fear. Maybe it is simply the beginning of something that hasn't fully formed yet. So we continue slowly, gently, following this young world as it grows, as it gathers mass, as it prepares for the next moment that will change everything. Just when it feels like this young world is finally beginning to take shape, just when Proto-Earth has gathered enough mass to hold itself together, to begin forming something that might resemble stability, the universe does something unexpected, something that reminds me that even at this stage, nothing is guaranteed, nothing is safe, nothing is final. Because in this early solar system, space is not empty. It is crowded, filled with other growing bodies, other protoplanets, each following their own path, each pulled by gravity, each moving through a delicate balance of motion and attraction. And sometimes those paths cross, not gently, not slowly, but violently, decisively, in a way that changes everything. And one of those encounters, one of those collisions, will shape the future of this planet and everything that will one day live on it. There is another body, not too different in size from this young Earth, moving through the same region of space, drawn by the same gravitational forces, formed from the same disk of material, a wandering protoplanet that we now call Theia. For a long time, it travels its own path, orbiting the young sun, existing quietly like everything else in this early system, until something shifts, something subtle, a gravitational nudge, a change in trajectory, a moment that seems small but carries enormous consequences. And then the distance between them begins to close. Slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, but inevitably, two worlds moving through space drawn together until there is no more distance left. And then impact. Not a collision like anything we can truly imagine, not something localized, not something contained, but an event so massive, so energetic that it reshapes an entire planet in an instant. Theia strikes the young Earth and everything changes. The energy released is beyond comprehension. Heat, shock, motion, the outer layers of both bodies are torn apart. vaporized, scattered outward into space, a storm of molten rock and debris expanding in all directions, surrounding what remains of Earth in a glowing cloud of fragments. And for a moment, it might seem like destruction, like everything that had been building, everything that had been forming has been undone. But the universe has a different way of working, because even in this violence, even in this chaos, something new begins to emerge. The debris does not simply disappear, it orbits, pulled by Earth's gravity, forming a ring, a disk of material circling the planet, fragments colliding, merging, gathering together slowly, gradually, just as before, but now on a different scale. And over time, that material begins to come together, not instantly, not perfectly, but inevitably, forming something new, the moon, a companion, born from collision, formed from the very substance of Earth itself, a body that will remain bound to this planet, influencing it in ways that will only become clear much later. And as I try to take this in, I feel that same quiet shift again, because this event, this violent, catastrophic moment, did not destroy Earth. It completed it. Without this collision, there would be no moon. And without the moon, everything we take for granted today might not exist, because the moon does something subtle, something quiet, something easy to overlook. It stabilizes Earth's rotation, Earth's tilt, keeping it from wobbling too wildly, keeping its axis steady over long periods of time. And that stability creates consistency. Consistency in climate, in seasons, in environmental conditions, the kind of consistency that life depends on. And suddenly, this accident, this moment of chaos, becomes something else entirely. A necessary step, a turning point, something that looks destructive but creates the conditions for everything that follows. And I can't help but reflect on that, because how many moments in life feel like that? Moments that seem like they break everything apart, that feel like loss, like disruption, like something has gone wrong. But in a larger timeline, in a perspective we cannot yet see, they become the very events that make everything else possible. Because without Theia, there is no moon. Without the moon, there is no stable Earth. Without that stability, there is no life as we know it. And without all of that, there is no moment like this. No one's sitting here thinking about any of it. And so I sit with that realization that sometimes what feels like destruction is actually creation. What feels like chaos is actually alignment. And what feels like an accident is part of something much larger, something that unfolds over time. In ways we cannot immediately understand, the moon continues to orbit quietly, steadily, a constant presence in the sky, a reminder of a moment when everything nearly fell apart and instead became something more. And as I look up at it now, I no longer see just a distant object. I see a consequence, a memory, a silent witness to a collision that made everything else possible. And in that quiet reflection, I begin to understand something deeper, that even the most violent moments can carry within them the seeds of balance, the seeds of stability, the seeds of life itself. And so we continue following this young Earth as it settles, as it cools, as it prepares for the next transformation that will bring it even closer to becoming home. After the collision, after the chaos, after the formation of the moon, the young Earth begins to change again, not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, patiently, as if the planet itself is learning how to become something more stable, something more capable of holding on to the conditions that life will one day require. At first, it is still a hostile world, a surface covered in molten rock, oceans of magma shifting and flowing under extreme heat, constant impacts from leftover debris, energy everywhere, instability everywhere, nothing that resembles the calm world we know today. But time, quietly, begins to transform everything. As the planet continues to cool, the outer layer begins to solidify, forming the first crust. Thin at first, fragile, constantly breaking and reforming, but still a beginning, a surface, a boundary between what lies beneath and what will eventually form above. And deep inside, something equally important is taking shape. Heavier elements, iron, nickel, begin to sink toward the center, pulled by gravity, forming a dense core, while lighter materials rise upward, creating layers, structure, organization. And from that internal movement, from that separation, something invisible but essential begins to emerge. A magnetic field, a protective shield, generated by the motion of molten metal deep within the Earth's core, extending outward into space surrounding the planet, deflecting harmful radiation, protecting the fragile surface from forces that could otherwise strip everything away. And as I think about that, I realize something quietly profound. Life doesn't just require presence, it requires protection. Because without this magnetic shield, the solar wind, cosmic radiation, would slowly erode the atmosphere, would strip away the very conditions needed for life to exist. But the Earth holds on to it, it protects itself. And that protection creates possibility. At the same time, above the surface, another transformation is unfolding. Volcanoes erupt, releasing gases trapped deep within the planet, water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, forming the earliest atmosphere. Thick, toxic, nothing like the air we breathe today, but still essential. Because this atmosphere does something important. It holds heat, it creates pressure, it allows the surface to cool in a controlled way, and most importantly, it prepares the conditions for something that will change everything. Water. At first, it exists as vapor, trapped in the atmosphere, swirling, waiting until temperatures drop just enough for condensation to begin. And then, rain. Not for minutes, not for hours, but for thousands of years. Rain falls, cooling the surface, filling the lowest regions, forming the first oceans. And as I imagine that moment, I pause again, because water, so simple, so common, is actually one of the most extraordinary conditions for life. It dissolves, it carries, it connects, allowing chemical reactions to occur, allowing molecules to interact, allowing complexity to grow. And now this planet, once molten and chaotic, has something new. A surface, an atmosphere, a magnetic field, and oceans. Each one fragile on its own, but together creating something rare, something precise, something that feels almost unlikely. And that's when the realization begins to settle in. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly. Like a quiet understanding that grows clearer with time. That life is not simply the result of chance. Not in the way we often think of it, because yes, there are random events, collisions, unpredictable moments, but there is also something else. A sequence, a chain of conditions, each one depending on the one before it, each one creating the possibility for the next. If the Earth had formed closer to the sun, the water would never have remained. If it had formed farther away, it might have frozen completely. If the core had not formed the way it did, there would be no magnetic field. If the atmosphere had not developed, there would be no stable surface. And if any one of those conditions failed, everything that follows would not exist. And that thought, it doesn't feel random. It feels like alignment, like a series of events that had to happen in just the right way, over an unimaginable span of time. And somehow they did. And now I am here, sitting on this planet, breathing this air, existing in a moment that depends on everything that came before it. And for a moment, I don't feel lost anymore. I don't feel small. I feel fortunate. Not because everything is perfect, not because life is easy, but because the conditions that allow me to exist at all are so rare, so fragile, so incredibly unlikely, and yet they happened. And as I sit with that realization, I feel something quiet settle inside me, a sense that maybe life is not just something that appears randomly. Maybe it is something that emerges when enough things go right, when enough conditions align, when enough time has passed. And if that's true, then this moment, this simple awareness, this quiet understanding is not ordinary. It is the result of everything that had to happen for life to begin. After the Earth begins to cool, after its surface hardens just enough to hold shape, after the atmosphere forms and the magnetic field quietly protects it from the violence of space, something even more gentle begins to unfold, something that does not arrive with impact or explosion, but with patience, with repetition, with time. Water begins to gather. At first, it exists only as vapor suspended in the thick, early atmosphere. Rising from volcanic eruptions, carried upward from deep within the planet, released through countless vents and fractures, invisible, waiting until the temperature drops just enough, and then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, condensation begins. Clouds form, heavy, dense, stretching across a sky that no human eyes have ever seen. And from those clouds, rain begins to fall. Not for a moment, not for a season, but for thousands, perhaps millions of years. Rain falls continuously, cooling the surface, collecting in the lowest regions, filling every depression, every fracture, every basin. And at the same time, something else is happening. From beyond the Earth, from the outer reaches of the early solar system, countless comets and icy bodies continue to collide with the planet, delivering even more water. Frozen remnants of distant regions now becoming part of this forming world. And so, from within and from beyond, water arrives, gathering, pooling, expanding, until eventually the surface of the Earth begins to change in a way that feels almost impossible to imagine. Vast bodies of water begin to form, the first oceans dark, deep, endless, stretching across a world that was once nothing but fire and rock. And as I try to picture this moment, I feel that same quiet sense of awe again, because this is not just water, this is transformation. A planet that was once hostile now begins to soften, to stabilize, to create conditions that feel almost welcoming, almost ready. And yet, there is still no life. Not yet, but everything is preparing for it, because water is not just a substance, it is a medium. A space where interactions can happen, where molecules can meet, where reactions can take place. It dissolves minerals, it carries elements, it allows complexity to emerge in ways that would be impossible in a dry, empty environment. And as I sit with that thought, I begin to understand something deeper, that life doesn't begin suddenly. It begins with conditions, with environments that allow possibility, with spaces where something new can slowly take shape, and these oceans, these vast silent bodies of water become exactly that, a cradle, a place where the building blocks of life can gather, interact, experiment over and over again for millions of years. And what fascinates me most is how quiet this moment is. There are no dramatic events here, no sudden transformations, just water, moving, shifting, responding to the planet around it. And yet, within that quiet movement, something extraordinary is being prepared, because in these oceans, in this seemingly simple environment, the stage is being set for the first spark of life. And I can't help but reflect on that because it reminds me that the most important beginnings are often the quietest, not the moments of intensity, not the moments of impact, but the slow, almost invisible changes that create the conditions for something new to emerge. And maybe that's something we often overlook. In our own lives, we look for big moments, clear turning points, something we can point to and say, that's when everything changed. But maybe change begins much earlier than that, in the quiet preparation, in the unseen shifts, in the environments we create for ourselves without even realizing it. Because just like these oceans, we are always preparing, always setting the stage for something that hasn't happened yet. And as I follow this journey, as I watch this young Earth covered in water, I begin to feel something building, a sense that something is about to begin. Something small, something fragile, but something that will change everything. Because in these oceans, life is waiting, not as something fully formed, but as a possibility, a quiet, persistent possibility that will soon take its first breath. For a long time, the oceans remain quiet, vast, deep, almost motionless from a distance, as if nothing is happening. as if the world is simply waiting, holding its breath, suspended in a state between possibility and reality. And if I didn't know what comes next, I might believe that this silence could last forever. But beneath the surface, hidden in places where no light reaches, something begins. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly, in a way that is easy to miss because it doesn't announce itself, it doesn't shine, it doesn't rise above the surface to be seen. It begins at a scale so small that it almost feels insignificant. Molecules, simple combinations of atoms, drifting, colliding, interacting within the water, carried by currents, influenced by heat from the planet's interior, energy from the sun above, and chemical gradients that create just enough imbalance, just enough opportunity for something new to happen. At first, these interactions are random, unstable, temporary. Structures form, then dissolve, form again, then disappear over and over for millions of years. And yet, something changes. Not because of intention, not because of design, but because given enough time, even randomness, right, can begin to organize itself. Certain combinations become more stable, certain patterns begin to repeat, and slowly a boundary emerges, a separation between what is inside and what is outside. The first cells, not complex, not intelligent, but something entirely new, something that can maintain itself, something that can interact with its environment, something that can persist. These are the earliest forms of life, microorganisms. And as I try to imagine this moment, I feel something shift again. Because life doesn't begin as something grand, it begins as something incredibly simple, something almost invisible. And yet, everything that will ever exist traces back to this quiet beginning. These early microorganisms do not think, they do not feel, they simply exist, absorbing energy, interacting with their surroundings, replicating, creating more of themselves. And over time, they begin to leave traces. Not in the way we leave memories, not in stories or records, but in structure. Layer by layer, these microorganisms interact with minerals in the water, forming slow, gradual accumulations, structures that grow over time, preserving a physical record of their presence. These are what we now call stromatolites, strange, layered formations, built not by intention, but by repetition, by countless generations of microscopic life, living, growing, and leaving behind evidence that they were once here. And what fascinates me is that these structures still exist today, not just as fossils, but in some places still living, still growing, quietly continuing a process that began billions of years ago. And when I think about that, I feel something deeper settle in. Because this is not just the origin of life, this is the origin of continuity. A line that stretches from the first microorganisms to everything that exists today, including me. And yet, if I were to look at those first forms of life, I might not even recognize them as life at all. They are too simple, too quiet, too far removed from what I associate with being alive. And maybe that's what makes this moment so powerful. Because it reminds me that the beginning of something extraordinary often looks completely ordinary. There is no clear moment where the universe announces life has begun. There is only a gradual transition from chemistry to biology, from interaction to existence. And maybe that's something we often misunderstand. We look for clear beginnings, for defined moments, for something we can point to and say, this is where everything started. But here, in the depths of these ancient oceans, there is no such moment, only a process, a slow, patient unfolding. And as I sit with that thought, I begin to see something differently. Because if life can emerge from something so simple, so quiet, so unremarkable, then maybe beginnings are not meant to be obvious. Maybe they are meant to be discovered only when we look back, and somewhere, in the darkness beneath those early oceans, the first life continues, unaware that it has just begun a journey that will lead to everything. For a long time, life remains small, quiet, almost invisible, hidden beneath the surface of ancient oceans, where those first microorganisms continue their slow existence, growing, dividing, repeating, with no awareness, no intention, no sense of direction, just survival, just continuation. And if we stayed in this moment, if nothing else changed, life might have remained that way forever. Simple, microscopic, confined to the water. But the universe rarely stands still. And somewhere within those early oceans, something new begins to emerge. Not a new creature, not something larger or more complex, something different, something that changes the rules entirely, a new way of interacting with energy. Some of these microorganisms, the ones we now call cyanobacteria, begin to do something extraordinary, something that no life form had done before in such a powerful way. They begin to use light, not just as warmth, not just as a passive condition, but as a source of energy. Through a process we now understand as photosynthesis, they capture sunlight, combine it with water and carbon dioxide, and transform it into energy they can use to survive, to grow, to reproduce. And in doing so, they produce something else. Something that, at the time, no other life form needed. Something that would soon become one of the most important elements for life as we know it: oxygen. At first, it seems insignificant, just a byproduct, released into the surrounding water, dissolving, reacting with other elements, binding with iron, settling into the ocean floor, quietly accumulating with no immediate consequence. Because in this early world, oxygen is not a gift, it is a threat. Most existing life forms at the time are not adapted to it. They do not need it, they cannot tolerate it, and yet it continues to be produced. Relentlessly, generation after generation, these cyanobacteria keep releasing oxygen, slowly, steadily changing the chemistry of the oceans and eventually the atmosphere itself. And for a long time, nothing seems to happen because the oxygen is absorbed, reacting with everything around it as if the planet itself is trying to contain it, trying to hold it back. But eventually, something shifts. The capacity of the environment to absorb oxygen begins to reach its limit, and for the first time, oxygen begins to accumulate, not just in the oceans, but in the atmosphere. And when that happens, everything changes. This moment, what we now call the Great Oxidation Event, is one of the most profound transformations in the history of Earth, because what was once a hostile byproduct begins to reshape the entire planet. The atmosphere changes, chemical reactions shift, entire ecosystems collapse, as many of the original life forms, unable to survive in an oxygen-rich environment, disappear. And for a moment, this might look like destruction, like a mistake, like something has gone wrong because life is being wiped out on a massive scale. But once again, the universe reveals a deeper pattern. Because this crisis, this dramatic shift creates new possibilities, oxygen, which was once toxic, becomes a powerful tool, a source of energy that allows for more efficient biological processes that enables the evolution of more complex forms of life. And as I sit with that realization, I feel that familiar shift again. Because this moment, this turning point, reminds me of something deeply human, that sometimes what feels like disruption, what feels like loss, what feels like everything falling apart, is actually the beginning of something new. Because without oxygen, life might have remained simple, limited, unchanged. But because of this transformation, because of this moment that changed everything, the path toward complexity, toward diversity, toward intelligence becomes possible. And that thought, it doesn't feel distant, it feels close. Because how many times in life do we resist change? Do we hold on to what is familiar even when something new is trying to emerge? And yet, just like those early microorganisms, we are part of a process that doesn't stop, that continues to evolve, whether we are ready or not. And somewhere in those ancient oceans, those cyanobacteria continue their quiet work, unaware that they have just transformed an entire planet, unaware that they have set the stage for everything that will come after. And as I reflect on that, I realized something simple but powerful, that the most important changes are often the ones we don't notice, the ones that happen slowly over time, until one day everything is different, and we are left wondering, when exactly did it all change? When exactly did everything begin to shift? But the truth is, it was happening all along, quietly, patiently, inevitably. And now, the Earth is no longer the same. The atmosphere is changing, the conditions are shifting, and life is about to take its next step into something far more complex, far more unpredictable, far more alive. For a long time, life remained simple, quiet, almost unchanged, drifting through the oceans, hidden beneath layers of water and time. Microorganisms continue their silent existence, growing, dividing, adapting, but never becoming something we would recognize as complex, as if the story of life has found a rhythm and decided to stay there. And if I pause here, if I imagine this moment lasting forever, it almost feels peaceful, stable, predictable, but the universe does not stay still. Because beneath that calm surface, beneath the slow repetition of microscopic life, something has been building, something has been preparing for a change so dramatic, so sudden, that it will feel like an explosion. Not of fire, not of destruction, but of life itself. For billions of years, life evolves quietly, experimenting, adapting, refining, until eventually something shifts, something reaches a threshold, and then everything changes. In what we now call the Cambrian explosion, life begins to diversify, rapidly, dramatically, in a way that has never happened before. New forms appear, new structures emerge, bodies become more complex, more specialized, and for the first time, life begins to take on shapes that we might almost recognize. Creatures with shells, pet with limbs, with eyes, with ways to move, to sense, to respond. And what amazes me is how fast this happens, not in an instant, not in the way we think of sudden change, but in geological terms. It is incredibly rapid, a burst of diversity, a wave of innovation, as if life itself has discovered new possibilities and cannot stop exploring them. And I find myself wondering, what changed? Because something must have shifted. Something must have unlocked this potential, whether it was oxygen levels rising, whether it was genetic complexity increasing, whether it was environmental pressure forcing adaptation, or perhaps all of it together. A combination of conditions aligning at just the right moment, and when they did, life didn't just continue. It expanded, it experimented, it diversified, it became something far more dynamic, far more unpredictable. And as I imagine these early oceans no longer quiet, no longer still, but filled with movement, with interaction, with creatures swimming, crawling, hunting, hiding, I feel something shift again. Because this is no longer just life. This is competition. This is survival in a new way. Predators and prey begin to emerge. Adaptations become necessary. Armor, speed, vision, each new development pushing life further, driving evolution forward in ways that feel almost relentless. And suddenly, life is no longer just existing. It is striving, it is responding, it is adapting, it is becoming something more. And that thought, it feels familiar because it reminds me that growth often comes from pressure, from challenge, from competition, from the need to survive in an environment that is constantly changing. And maybe that's why this moment feels so important, because it marks the transition from simple existence to active evolution, from life that is passive to life that is engaged, interacting, responding, shaping its own path. And as I sit with that realization, I begin to see something deeper. That complexity doesn't appear all at once. It emerges when enough conditions align, when enough pressure builds, when enough time has passed, and then it expands rapidly, almost uncontrollably. And maybe that's not just true for life. Maybe it's true for everything, for ideas, for change, for growth. That sometimes nothing seems to happen for a long time until suddenly everything does. And as I follow this explosion of life, as I watch the oceans fill with diversity, with movement, with forms that continue to evolve and transform, I begin to feel something else, a sense that this story is moving closer, closer to something I recognize, closer to something that feels familiar. Because within this vast diversity, within this endless experimentation, are the beginnings of everything that will come after. Every creature, every system, every form of life that will one day walk on land traces back to this moment, this quiet yet overwhelming expansion where life, for the first time, truly begins to explore what it can become. And somewhere within that exploration, within that endless unfolding, the path towards something else, something far more aware, far more complex, is already beginning, quietly, patiently, waiting for its time to emerge. For a long time, life remains bound to the oceans, protected, contained, almost sheltered within the vast waters that first allowed it to exist. And from a distance, it might seem like this is enough, that life has found its place, that there is no reason to leave, because beyond the surface, beyond the edge of those ancient seas, the world is still harsh, dry, exposed, filled with dangers that no living organism has ever faced before. And yet, something begins to change. Not suddenly, not as a single moment, but as a slow pressure, a quiet push, as if life itself is beginning to explore, to reach beyond what it already knows. Because the oceans, as vast as they are still limited. And over time, life begins to adapt, to experiment, to find ways, to survive in places it was never meant to be. The first to make this transition are not animals, but plants. Simple, primitive organisms moving toward the edges of water, existing in shallow regions, in places where water meets land, where conditions are unstable, where survival is uncertain. And to exist here, they must change. They must develop ways to hold on to water, to prevent themselves from drying out, to withstand exposure to sunlight, to deal with gravity in a way they never had to before. Because in water, everything is supported, everything is carried, but on land, everything must hold itself up. And so slowly, plants begin to evolve. They develop protective layers, structures that reduce water loss. They form roots to anchor themselves, to absorb nutrients directly from the ground. They create internal systems to transport water, to distribute energy throughout their structure. And with each small adaptation, they move further away from the water, until eventually land is no longer empty. It begins to change. Green spreads across the surface, slowly at first, then more steadily, transforming the landscape, altering the atmosphere, producing oxygen, creating new possibilities. And where plants go, other life begins to follow. Because now there is food, there is shelter, there is opportunity. The first animals to move onto land are small, fragile, creatures that still depend on water but are beginning to explore beyond it. Arthropods, early insects, organisms with bodies adapted for protection, with structures that allow them to survive in air, to move across surfaces, to breathe in a different way. And as I imagine this moment, I feel something shift again. Because this is not just movement, this is transformation. Life is no longer confined, it is expanding, it is redefining what is possible. And to do that, it must change its very structure. Bodies evolve, limbs develop, strong enough to support weight, lungs begin to form, capable of extracting oxygen from the air, skin adapts to prevent dehydration, systems emerge that allow life to survive in an environment completely different from where it began. And none of this happens quickly. It takes millions of years, countless attempts, endless failures, because not every adaptation works, not every step forward succeeds, but some do, and those that succeed, they survive, they reproduce, they pass on what works, and slowly life reshapes itself to fit a new world. And as I sit with that realization, I begin to see something deeper, because this journey from water to land is not just physical, It is a story of courage, not in the emotional sense, but in the sense of persistence, of moving into the unknown, of adapting to conditions that were never guaranteed. And maybe that's something we can recognize. Because how often do we stay where it's safe, where everything is familiar, where survival is certain, and yet growth happens only when something pushes us beyond that. Just like life, we evolve. When we step into environments we were not designed for and learn how to survive anyway. And now the Earth is no longer just a world of oceans. It is becoming something more, a world of land, of air, of expanding ecosystems, a world where life is no longer limited, but constantly exploring, constantly adapting, constantly becoming something new. And somewhere within this slow, patient expansion, the path towards something else, something more aware, something more complex, is beginning to take shape, quietly, inevitably, as life continues its journey from the simplest forms towards something that will one day look back and wonder how it all began. For a long time, after life has spread across the land, after plants have transformed the surface of the earth and animals have begun to walk, crawl, and breathe air, the planet enters a new chapter, feels almost dominant, almost overwhelming in its scale. A chapter where a single group of creatures rises above all others, shaping the world in ways that seem unstoppable. The age of dinosaurs. And at first, their rise is not sudden, not explosive, but gradual, following one of the greatest mass extinctions the Earth has ever experienced. A collapse so severe, so complete, that it wipes out the majority of life, leaving behind empty ecosystems, silent landscapes, opportunities waiting to be filled. And in that silence, something new begins to emerge. Dinosaurs. Small at first, unassuming, just another group of survivors. But over time, they adapt, they diversify, they grow, and eventually they dominate. For millions of years, they become the rulers of the Earth. Not in a conscious sense, not by intention, but simply because they are well suited, perfectly adapted to the conditions of their time. Some grow massive, towering above the landscape, moving slowly, feeding on vast amounts of vegetation. Others become fast, sharp predators, hunting, surviving through speed, through precision. And as I imagine this world, it feels alive in a way that is almost overwhelming. Forests stretch endlessly, filled with movement, with sound, with creatures of all shapes and sizes, each playing a role, each part of a system that has reached a kind of balance. And for a moment, it feels permanent, as if this is how the world is meant to be, as if nothing could ever change it. Because for over 150 million years, dinosaurs continue to evolve, to adapt, to thrive, longer than humans have existed, longer than most forms of life we recognize today. And that's what makes this moment so powerful, because when something lasts that long, it begins to feel inevitable, unbreakable, like it will continue forever. But the universe has never worked that way, because just as before, just as in every chapter of this story, everything changes, and sometimes it changes in a single moment. Somewhere in space, far beyond the awareness of anything living on Earth, a massive object moves silently, unnoticed, unavoidable. An asteroid, traveling for millions of years, following a path that will eventually intersect with this planet. And then it arrives, not gradually, not gently, but instantly. Impact. The force released is beyond comprehension, a collision so powerful that it reshapes the entire planet in a matter of hours. Shockwaves spread across the surface, wildfires ignite, oceans surge, debris is thrown into the atmosphere, blocking out sunlight, plunging the world into darkness. And what follows is not just destruction, but collapse. Ecosystems fail, food chains break, temperatures drop, and the conditions that once supported the dominance of dinosaurs begin to disappear. And for the first time in millions of years, they cannot adapt fast enough. They cannot survive the speed of change, and slowly, then rapidly, they disappear. Not all at once, but inevitably, until the world that once belonged to them is empty again. And as I sit with that moment, I feel something shift again. Because it's difficult to accept that something so powerful, so dominant, so long-lasting can simply end because it reminds me that nothing is permanent. Not dominance, not success, not even survival. Everything exists within conditions, and when those conditions change, everything must adapt or disappear. And yet, this is not just an ending, because just like every extinction before, this collapse creates space for something new. Because while the dinosaurs vanish, not all life disappears. Small creatures remain hidden, adaptable, waiting. And in that silence, in that empty world left behind, the next chapter begins. And as I reflect on this, I begin to understand something deeper, that even the most powerful eras, even the most dominant forces, are only temporary, and that change, no matter how sudden, no matter how destructive, is always part of something larger, something that continues beyond any single moment. And somewhere in the aftermath of that impact, in a world that has gone quiet again, life begins to rise, once more, quietly, slowly, inevitably, moving forward towards something entirely new. After the silence that follows the fall of the dinosaurs, after the dust settles and the skies slowly begin to clear, the earth feels different, not empty, but open, as if something has shifted, as if the balance has been reset, and for a moment, everything seems uncertain again. Because when something so dominant disappears, it leaves behind space that must be filled. And quietly, almost unnoticed at first, something begins to rise within that space. Small creatures, fragile, easily overlooked. Mammals, they had always been there, living in the shadows, surviving beneath the feet of giants, adapting quietly, waiting, not by choice, but by necessity. And now, for the first time, they are no longer hidden. With the absence of dinosaurs, the world changes. Forests recover, ecosystems reorganize, new opportunities emerge. And mammals begin to expand, not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily, evolving into new forms, filling niches that were once occupied by others. Some grow larger, stronger, others become faster, more agile, and many develop something that will prove to be one of the most important traits of all: more complex brains, because survival now requires something different. Not just size, not just strength, but adaptability. The ability to learn, to remember, to respond to changing environments, and over millions of years, this quiet advantage begins to shape the future. Mammals spread across the planet, diversifying, evolving into countless forms, each one adapting to its environment, each one continuing the long process of change. And somewhere within this unfolding story, a particular lineage begins to take shape. Primates. Creatures adapted to life in trees, with grasping hands, forward-facing eyes, depth perception, and a growing ability to process information. At first, they are just one branch among many, nothing particularly dominant, nothing that stands out in the grand scale of life. But over time, something shifts. Their brains continue to grow, their behavior becomes more complex, their interactions more social, their awareness more refined. And eventually, one group begins to move differently, not just through trees, but across the ground, walking upright, freeing their hands, changing the way they interact with the world around them. And as I imagine this moment, I feel that same quiet sense of anticipation again, because this is no longer just evolution. This is a transition, a shift towards something new. Early human ancestors begin to emerge, not fully human. Not yet what we would recognize, but different, using simple tools, communicating in basic ways, adapting not just physically, but behaviorally. And over time, this process continues. Generation after generation, small changes accumulate, brains expand, and language begins to form. Social structures become more complex, until eventually something appears, something that can look at the world and ask questions, Homo sapiens. And when I sit with that moment, I feel something deeper than before, because this is no longer just about survival. This is awareness. The ability to think, to reflect, to imagine things that are not immediately present, to wonder about the past, about the future, about existence itself. And suddenly the story changes again, because for the first time, life is not just evolving, it is understanding And that thought, it feels almost overwhelming because it means that everything we've followed so far, from the first particles to the formation of stars to the emergence of life, has led to this moment. A moment where the universe becomes aware of itself through us, through our thoughts, our questions, our need to understand where we came from. And as I reflect on that, I realize something quietly profound, that I am not just observing this story, I am part of it, a continuation of billions of years of evolution, carrying within me the memory of everything that came before, and yet here I am still asking the same question: where do I fit in all of this? And maybe the answer is not something separate. Maybe the answer is this, that I am the result of a universe that has been building for billions of years. Trying, failing, evolving until eventually it created something capable of asking that very question. And in that realization, something shifts again, because I am no longer just a small part of the universe. I am a way for the universe to understand itself. And that thought, it doesn't feel small. It feels like meaning. For a long time after humans begin to emerge, after awareness takes its first fragile steps into the world, life continues to evolve, not just physically anymore, but in a new way, a way that feels different from everything that came before. Because something has changed. Evolution is no longer only happening in the body, it is happening in the mind. At first, human beings live simply, moving through landscapes, following food, adapting to seasons, surviving day by day, much like countless forms of life before them. But there is something different now, something subtle, something growing quietly beneath the surface. Memory. Imagination, the ability to think beyond the present moment, and slowly that changes everything. Humans begin to use tools, not just instinctively, but intentionally. They shape stone, they create fire, they learn, they remember, they pass knowledge from one generation to the next. And for the first time, life is no longer just adapting, it is accumulating experience. It is building upon itself. And then another shift happens. One that feels small at first, but carries enormous consequences. Humans stop moving. Not entirely, not immediately, but gradually, they begin to stay in one place, to observe the land, to understand patterns, to notice that seeds grow, that seasons repeat, that food can be cultivated, not just found. And this is where something profound begins. Agriculture. At first, it seems simple, planting, waiting, harvesting, but what it creates something new, stability. For the first time, humans are not entirely dependent on movement. They can stay, build, create something lasting. Villages begin to form, then grow. It's getting into larger communities, into settlements, into cities, and with that growth, new systems emerge. Language becomes more complex, ideas are recorded, beliefs are formed, structures are built, societies take shape. And as I follow this transformation, I feel something different, because this is no longer just evolution. This is civilization, a world where humans are no longer simply surviving. They are creating, shaping their environment, building systems, telling stories, trying to understand not just how to live, but why they exist at all. And that question, the same question that started this journey, begins to return. But now it feels different, because I have seen the path from particles to stars to planets to oceans to life to consciousness to this moment. And as I sit with that entire timeline, stretching across billions of years, I begin to understand something that I didn't before, that I am not small, not in the way I once believed, because I used to think that being small in a vast universe meant being insignificant. But now I see it differently. I am the result of everything that has ever happened. Every star that formed, every star that died, every collision, every transformation, every moment of chaos. Every moment of balance has led to this awareness, to this ability to sit here and reflect on all of it. And that realization, it changes something deep inside me, because suddenly My life is not just a brief moment lost in an endless universe. It is a continuation, a point along a line that stretches back 13.8 billion years and forward into something I cannot yet see. And maybe that is the answer I was looking for. Not a definition, not a clear explanation, but a realization that I am not separate from this story. I am part of it, a living result of everything that came before. And that means no matter how small I feel, no matter how lost I sometimes become, I carry within me the entire history of the universe. And somehow, that doesn't make me feel insignificant. It makes me feel connected, grounded, present, part of something far greater than I ever imagined. And in that quiet understanding, I finally find something I wasn't even sure I was searching for. Not certainty, not control, but meaning. A simple, deep, unshakable sense that I am here because everything had to happen. And that makes this moment more than enough.